right. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Leaders Uncut. And today I'm so thrilled to have with us Travis Cody, who is so many things, but among all the things that he is, he's an international best-selling author. He's a Hollywood screenwriter. He's done film development. He's been appearing on the Ellen show as well. So anyway, welcome, Travis. It's so good to have you on the show.
Man, you say that, I'm like, I guess I get around.
That's right. That's right. So tell us, I know what you do now. Of course, you write books and you help also entrepreneurs who want to publish their book. You also help entrepreneurs leverage the power of books to grow their business. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. So I'm a definitive writer. Half of my business is writing and publishing my own books. I've got 16 books that are published, and I've got probably 4 more that are going to be out this year, which sounds arrogant. It's just at 2 years I didn't get them edited, and so they all got edited at once, and now they're all coming out at once. And
hey, you know what? I love it. So let's talk about that too.
And so so part of my business is I write and publish. I do sales copy. I do books. I still have my fingers dabbling in Hollywood a little bit, so I get paid to consult on screenplays. And then on the other half of the business is finding successful consultants, CEOs, founders, business owners that usually most of them find me because their friends and family have been saying, like, man, you know so much about this. Why don't you write a book? Right. And so I think that starts the process of well, how do we even do that? And where do you start? And so that's where I come in. I help guide people through the overwhelm and getting from idea to getting a book done and ready to go out into the world.
Yeah, and that's wonderful because I've known personally so many people that just said just that. I need to write a book. I have so much to say. And,
well, I know a guy.
Now we know a guy. Now we know where to send them. So this is great. So you're also known to be one of the fastest writers. Is that correct?
Yeah, when I was in Hollywood, that was what I was known for. I could go from an idea to having a script done. I would go from blank page to a full script in about 4 or 5 days. From an idea to having the script done in about 2 weeks. It usually takes me about a week to plan and outline, and then once I've got that figured out, then the writing could go pretty quickly.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So tell us about the process here. If someone is interested in writing a book, what's the process? How long does it take? Can you just give an idea on investment as well?
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I'm gonna go on a little side tangent here a little bit and give an analogy that I think is useful.
Yeah.
Because one of the things there's when I meet with somebody who's very successful in business and we have the conversation and you go, God, well, you know so much about this. Why don't you have a book? There's sort of 3 things that come up with that. First off, we all have memories of being in school and having to write research papers, and it was anxiety filled, and it was pressure filled, and it was not a fun experience. And that was 10 or 12 pages. So you think, oh, you got to write 200 pages. Your brain just goes, that's so overwhelming. So that's the first thing. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. Second thing is you're busy running a business. You got a family. Most people have kids. Like, where are you going to get the time to actually devote to this thing? Yeah. And then the third part of that is most people are not professional writers. And so there's that what's the imposter syndrome of like, if I write, can I write a book even though I'm not really a writer? And so I like to say that you need to look at it a little bit differently, because Amazon doesn't have a best-selling writer category, but they do have a best-selling author category. So the first thing you need to do is separate yourself. If you're a successful business owner, you don't need to be a writer, but you can be an author. So what's the difference? I compare it to like being a director of a film, right? So the director, he supervises a lot, but 90% of the hard work and effort of a movie is done by other experts. Right, Steven Spielberg, he doesn't write the script, but he shows up on set and he's not dealing with the equipment and the setups and the licensing and all that stuff. He just shows up and does one thing. And then even when the movie's done, there's usually another year and a half of editing and CGI and music and sound. He doesn't do any of that. Now he supervises all of that, right? But teams of sometimes hundreds of people are doing all that work for him. Yeah. But when you go to the movie theater, what does it say first thing? A film by Steven Spielberg.
That's right.
And that's what being an author is. It is knowing what you're good at, supervising things to a rough draft, and then just let other experts take over and handle the rest of it for you, so that you then can come in and do sort of the final stamp of approval. Now, when you follow that process, you can go from, I have this idea about writing a book, to having a book completed and ready to publish in 3 or 4 months. because again, all of your time is at the front. You know, the first month you put 10 to 12 hours into it, and then 90% of the work from that time is done by someone else. So over the next 2-3 months, you know, 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, you're checking in, but then you can get it. And that's one of the ways that you can get your book done. And I want to clarify, that's not hiring a ghostwriter. This process is a little bit differently, right? Ghostwriter is you meet with somebody, they interview you for an hour, and then they go make a bunch of stuff up, and then they come back to you and you hope it sounds good. That's not what we do. You actually create the rough draft yourself. So 95% of the book is already created. And again, right, it's sort of like Spielberg showing up on set. He's got a lot of footage that's been filmed. They don't use it all, right? But at least the rough draft is there so that the editors now have something to work with. And it's
well, you have to. You cannot invent everything. It's impossible. So that makes complete sense. Yeah. And then you have to, I'm sure, to give also realistic expectations. I've met a lot of people who wrote their first book and thought they were going to be a New York Times bestseller in 6 months, right?
Yeah, and even then, right, the bestseller, the title best-selling book, especially New York Times best-selling book, it's a little misleading because most people, you know, you'll see Tony Robbins, and Tony Robbins is a New York Times best-selling author, and he's almost a billionaire at this point, right? So you think, oh, if I have a book, I'm going to be like that. But that's not what if you or your audience happens to know who Bob Proctor is, a very, very wealthy man, was in the movie The Secret. He's had, you know, I think he's got a lot of published books. He's wealthy enough that when he was still with us, he had a private jet. I saw him speaking one time, and somebody in the audience asked the question. They said, I want to be a best-selling author and make millions like you. And he put his hand up and he said, I'm just going to set you straight here. He's like, I have never made a penny from any of my best-selling books. And the whole audience kind of gasped because he's got a lot of books. Right. And then he got a little twinkle in his eye and he leaned into the mic and he said, but I have made millions from being a best-selling author. And that's where the power of a book comes in. And that's where most entrepreneurs, when they want to write a book, a first-time author having a book that's going to go supernova and sell millions and millions of copies of a book. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, because obviously it does. But Amazon alone is publishing over 1 million books per year. So you look at the end of the year and how many books have stood out and collectively got attention. Maybe a dozen. Right? So the odds of you doing that are pretty low. So if you are writing a book thinking that you're going to get rich off of the book royalties off of Amazon, like that's the first mistake you're going to make. You can't do that. Now, if you're a fiction writer, can you make a lot of money on Amazon? You can, but you generally need to have 4 or 5 books before you actually start making more than $1,000 a month in royalties, right? So it is, and so if you can get up to 20 books, which most people write a book a year, it's a bit of a journey, right? So where the power comes from is it's not the book itself, it's what you do with the book. So one of the phrases I use with my clients is it starts with the book. It starts with the book. A book is like a magic key. Right now, as a business owner, there's a door in front of you that you can't get through. And when you have a book, like that book opens that door, and on the other side of that doorway, there's all of these opportunities that you can't tap into right now. And that's where the beauty and the power of a book comes into, is that all of those things that open up to you now. So, you know, the first thing that a lot of entrepreneurs will do is, I want a book because they want to start doing keynote speeches. And yes, having a best-selling book is going to make it much easier for you to get paid keynote speeches. So I'm friends with a event coordinator here in Las Vegas. If you don't know, Las Vegas does, the last I heard, it's something like 10,000 conferences and events here in a year. That's crazy to me. But she was telling me that some of the events that she runs are pretty big. You know, some of them get 10, 15, 20,000 people coming. And so they get solicited from people all the time going, let me come speak in front of your audience. And she said they have two piles of those letters. There's the author pile and then people who don't have a book. And they said they'll always go through this pile first, and if there's any left over, which usually there isn't, then they'll go over here. So just even having a book, even if you don't have more than 10 reviews on Amazon and you only sell 100 copies of it, if it's on Amazon, you've suddenly now opened up a door to opportunities you haven't. And I think a good example of that is one of my books. It's called The Inherent Genius of Sylvester Stallone. It's a short book. It was only 75 pages. I was writing it as kind of an homage to Sylvester Stallone and pointing out some things that people don't know about him, in particular being he's a writer. He's actually had more produced screenplays than any other writer and screenwriter in Hollywood history, which
really?
most people don't.
Yeah.
I didn't. That book was just a passion project. I released it. I didn't really give it much marketing. I really haven't given it much attention. And darn it, if that book doesn't sell more than any of my other books, even the ones that I'm throwing lots of money at marketing-wise.
Really?
Now, here's the remarkable thing about that book. I published that over a decade ago. And again, no promotion or marketing effort into it, really. I just let it out into the world, and that's what I was doing. A producer on the History Channel saw the book, and they were doing an episode about Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. And they reached out to me and asked me if I could come to LA and be the guest expert and talk about Stallone's career.
Oh, wow.
And so I ended up getting on a couple of episodes of the History Channel, probably $180,000 to $200,000 worth of free airtime for the amount of time I was on those shows.
Wow.
That would not have happened if I hadn't done that book, right? So people would look at that book going, oh, that book's a failure, because I really haven't promoted it a lot. But the opportunities that it bought me just because it was out into the world, you can't put a price on that.
Plus, hey, it was on Sylvester Stallone, so you had something really powerful there, right?
As far as there's not too many people that have written a book about Sylvester Stallone, so it kind of put me in a rare little community.
So I mean, I would imagine you have some exceptions, but a lot of time you also have to have a holistic approach to your brand, your foundation, your marketing, right? So it's not just writing a book, and you need a good website, you need to have a marketing strategy, you need to be consistent, you need to talk about it, you need to advertise. It does not come on its own. So do you also assist with that?
Yes. And that actually brings up a good point. So earlier I was saying that, don't expect to make a lot of money from the Amazon sales. So then it's like, well, then why do I have the book? Yeah. Because it's the leverage point of what you do afterwards. Yeah. So I have a book, and I don't know if it'll show up on the camera because of the, there we go.
Yeah, it shows up.
So this book, I've probably sold 500 copies of that book on Amazon. My author friends are embarrassed for me because it's only sold that many, and it's been out, 8 or 9 years. But that book, I put all of my marketing dollars in YouTube and Facebook ads, promoting that book through my own website. So this book has its own website. I send all my traffic there. And over 8 or 9 years, I can directly attribute probably $1 million in revenue from clients that have found that book and found me. So do I care that it's only sold 500 copies on Amazon? I don't care. It's there because it's searchable. But what the book has done for me is the man who wrote the foreword of that book, his name's Ron Lynch. Ron Lynch was really big in the infomercial space. Blue Blockers and GoPro. Those were campaigns that he developed, right? Yeah. He told me he has a book. He published it 15 years ago. He's only sold 1,100 copies of it, and he admitted that 300 copies of those he had purchased and just given them out to anyone. But he said over a 15-year period, he can trace over $22 million in revenue to his production company because people found that book and they read it and came to him and said, hey, can you help us do that on our business?
Isn't that amazing?
So again, didn't sell a lot of copies, but it's generated a lot of revenue. And that is, I think, for most entrepreneurs, especially solopreneurs or consultants, that's the hidden opportunity that they miss with the book, is they get a little too caught up in, oh, I didn't sell very many on Amazon, therefore now it's just an expensive business card that I have. And that's unfortunately how too many people I meet kind of treat their books. Yeah,
but that's good to have that open mind and to know that you cannot control the outcomes and be open to any type of outcomes, because it's a great example. You don't know what can happen thanks to a book. So I mean, you've been working with some of the biggest names in the industry, in the marketing industry, right? Russell Brunson's one of them. Tai Lopez is somebody I followed for years, who helped me build my own company. David Garfinkel, my God, and there's so many others. So do you work just with celebrities, or do you also work with anyone? And is there a selection process? Called me old-fashioned, but my belief is that everybody has a story that's worthy to be published as a book. So maybe that's for business. 85% of my business is from entrepreneurs that are wanting to use the book to pass forward their knowledge. Right. Lately, I've been having quite a few founders and CEOs that have been in business, they've been in a career 20, 25 years, and now they are really starting to kind of feel the
I'm going to call it the pull to give back to the next generation, where they're in this position of being they really want to start mentoring people and helping them avoid the mistakes, and so they're writing books for them. But two of my favorite books that I've helped publish, one of them was a gentleman. He was 75, he was retired. He wrote a book, you can look it up. It's called My Curious Life. When My Grandchildren Ask, Tell Them This. And when he reached out to me, he said, look, I'm 75, my grandkids are very young. I according to the average lifespan in America, I'm at the end. Who knows how much longer I'm going to be around? And he's like, but I've lived a pretty fantastic life. I've had some really great experiences, and I really want my grandkids to know about those. And so that book was written. Yes, it's on Amazon, but it was written purely just for his family. And it was such a great book. And there's another book by Ricky Ware called Illegitimately Blessed, and then the subtitle was My Journey from Black to White to Me. And that was Ricky. He was born in the 60s. His mother was Scottish. His father was Nigerian. And so he was half black. And right before he was born, his dad was in a car wreck and he died. And so his mom, being a single white woman in 60s England, didn't know what to do. So she put him up for adoption. Wow. And he ended up getting adopted by a British family. It was white. And so he was talking about through his whole life, right? He was the black kid in a white community and got treated as such, and got a big chip on his shoulder. And so when he was 19, he's like, I'm going to go track down my father's family. I'm going to go home to my people. And so he went to Nigeria. And then he got there and he tracked down his family. And he said the interesting thing that happened was when he got there, no one would accept him because he was too white to be part of the community. And he said that really messed with his sense of identity. He's like, well, who am I if the white people say I'm too dark and the dark people say I'm too white? And that's why the title's called From Black to White to Me, because he finally realized that it wasn't about the skin color. It was about the own personal.
That must be a great story. Yeah.
It's a great story. It's a fantastic story because it comes to show you that really it doesn't matter what other people tell you. At the end of the day, all of your power is going to come from what you believe about yourself.
That's
so those books have nothing to do with business, but those are very powerful stories. And I feel anybody has stories. So I have another book here, right? So this one, right? It's called, we gotta get it.
30 Days Unplugged.
30 Days Unplugged. That is about a 30-day period in my life. And I'm mentioning that because a lot of times you go, oh, Travis, I want to write a book someday, but I'm not old enough. My life isn't that interesting. I really haven't done enough to kind of fill a book. Well, I fill the book just by keeping a journal of a 30-day experiment I did on myself, and I ended up having a 300-page book from it. Wow. So a single moment in your life can actually be turned into a story that you can use to help other people, and that's what that book
and is. I love that, because a lot of people are actually journaling, and I think some of the people that are journaling, they have sometimes such wisdom. And they think it's just benefiting them, but it could benefit a lot of other people, right? Sure. So that's a great example of, hey, you can use all of that to write a book.
I saw a picture one time, and it was a little sticky note that had been taped on a little street lamp on a corner, and it was a permanent marker, and it said, your struggles and the struggles and challenges that you've overcome will someday be a lifeline to others if you share it.
That's so true. That is so true. But sometimes we're so self-centered that we can't think that way. But that's something that I've learned is be authentic, share your story, because especially nowadays, I think people need that. They need that, those examples of survival and faith and hope, and that, hey, there's always something for you to do out there. Don't give up. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think right now, especially in the time and era that we're in, I think people are craving authenticity.
They are.
We've had so, especially at the internet, and there was the sign of the polish there in the first, little while of the internet. And look, love him or hate him, but one of the reasons that I feel Donald Trump resonates with so many people is he's just authentically himself.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You look at the way he spoke in the 80s, and you could say, wow, there's things about that person, and
Yeah.
here we are 40 years later, and you're going, oh, it's the same guy.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I love. I'm like you. I love that, and that's okay. But people fear, oh, maybe I don't know what people are going to think if I do this, if I do that. Just be yourself. Another example that somebody I love, it's Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy is real. Hey, you know what? He swears, but that's him. And why he's so successful? Because he's him, and he says things the way they are and the way he believes, and he's consistent because he's authentic.
One of the trends that's going on right now, I think is really interesting, is with some of the supermodels and some of the actresses. They're, getting up in years, 50s and their 60s, and they're starting to share selfies and videos themselves with no makeup.
Yeah.
What is that, right? It's being authentic. Like, oh yeah, well, here's what you can do with makeup, and here's what it looks without it, right?
Yeah.
Oddly, they still look ridiculously beautiful without the makeup, which I think is funny. But the fact that they're now going like, hey, it's okay, like let's embrace this process, and we don't need to be tied to this one thing. I think it's super refreshing.
Yeah, no, I love that. So do you have to be a good writer? I mean, a lot of people think, okay, Travis tells me I can write my book, I can give him anything. But a lot of people think, hey, I'm not good enough. What is Travis going to think? If I give him shit, sorry, excuse my French, but maybe that's not going to work. So do you care if people are not good writers, if they share something with you that's not very...
I don't even ask for any sort of writing samples when people say it, because my process, I'm going to share another Hollywood story. So my first book I thought about for 4 or 5 years, and it took me 2 years to write it, and it was a struggle. 5-10 hours a week in front of my computer, battling my own demons. In my second book, I actually got a publishing deal with a publisher, and that one took me 19 months, and that one was even worse experience because I had deadlines that I didn't set, and so now I had all this extra pressure. So my mentor in Hollywood, his name was Jonathan Crane. His wife was Sally Kellerman. She was a huge actress in the 70s and the 80s. And in the mid 2000s, she got a deal to write her memoir. And so I remember being in the office, kind of walking down the hallway, and I'm like hearing Sally laugh hysterically. And I look in her office, and she's in there dancing around. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm working on my book. And I was so confused because my brain's like, when I worked on my book, it was misery and suffering. And here she's dancing around and she's laughing. And so I started asking her questions about, what are you doing? And through that process, I realized she didn't approach writing a book like a writer. She approached writing a book like an actress. So she used an entirely different process. And that's when it kind of dawned on me of like, oh, I'm so much in my writer lane of like, this is just the way that it is. Why? Because that's what everyone has done. Ernest Hemingway, you got to sit in front of the typewriter and bleed. Yeah. And then Sally comes along and is like, I don't sit in front of the computer and type it out. No, we do this other thing that's more fun. So the reason I'm sharing that story is Sally didn't actually sit down and write anything. She had conversations with people, and they recorded those conversations and they transcribed those, and then they edited those. Okay. So if you're someone that can sit down at a family gathering or with friends and can have a conversation, or you can get on a podcast and have a conversation like we're doing right now, that's all you need to be able to become an author of a book.
Okay, well, that's important because also some people are visually impaired. So, some people have more challenges, but they still want to do something like that. So, and that's what you say on your website. You said your mission is really to remove those roadblocks, to remove the barriers, to remove the pain points, and make this process as easy and enjoyable as possible, because that, I think, would alleviate some of the fears that people have.
Yeah. And again, it comes down to, this is what I think is really interesting. So if we're having a conversation and I'm like, hey, Catherine, how did you get started in the business that you're doing branding? Like, tell me about that. And we would have a nice conversation in 10 or 15 minutes, and you tell me the story, and I would get up. Now, if I said, Catherine, I've got a website that gets 500 million visitors a month, and I'm going to take your story and I'm going to put it as an article, a front page. 500 million people are going to see this. Mm-hmm. I need you to write that story out, maybe 2,000 words, and give it to me, and we'll post it on the website. Mm-hmm. 5 months from now, I'll be like, hey, how's the article coming? And I'll be like, well, like, this is busy and that's busy. Yeah. One way takes you 5 months, another way takes you 10 minutes. Yeah. But the funny thing is, it's the same story. Mm. Right. So why don't we get rid of the thing that takes us 5 months and just share the story in a way that we can do it really quickly? And then again, we treat that as the rough draft, and then we bring in editors to work from that and polish it for us.
No, that makes sense. So you also have a podcast, right?
I do. Yeah. I have a couple of podcasts.
Can you talk about that?
Sure. I have one podcast called Just Right. play on words, WRITE. And in that one, I just interview people that are really good. David Garfinkel is one of them, and John Benson, and people that have written books, people that are really good at the craft of writing. And I have a secondary podcast that actually hasn't come out yet. It's coming out in February 2025, which is called The Victory Show. And that is just interviewing really high-level entrepreneurs, CEOs, and founders, talking about what does it take to scale a business. Because one of the things that I found interesting over the years of working with people to write and publish books, a lot of people that find me, they're very successful, but their businesses are sort of stuck in the $500,000 to $1 million per year mark, maybe 3 or 5 employees, sometimes 10 employees. But they never really can kind of get past that. And a year ago, I got hired by the CEO of a company that he took it from 6 employees to 185, I think they have now. It's going to do 120 million in revenue this year. Wow. So I asked him, like, so how did you get there? And we've had a lot of conversations about the pain points of going from 10 employees to 25 employees, and from 25 to 50 and 50 to 100. And like each one of those things, like new challenges arrive and new things that you wouldn't think about as being a problem become problems. It's just a bigger level now, and you're responsible for more people. So on the Victory Show, we're bringing in people who have kind of gone through that journey to talk about if you have a business and you want to scale that big, because again, not everybody wants to do that. I have a friend of mine who's doing $1 million a year, and he doesn't want to go any bigger than that. It's totally fine with him, right? But for the people that do, like, what's it take to get to 5 million to 10 million to 100 million? That's the conversations we're having on that show, which I love it. Is also going to become a book called From Vision to Victory. All those conversations.
I was going to tell you that. I'm sure that was going to maybe several books too, because if you have all these stories, we don't know. Sure. But it helps when you listen to people who have done it and talk about their processes, the challenges, how to do it. So that's wonderful. Yeah, well, you must be a busy man.
I stay busy.
Yeah. What do you love the most? What fulfills you the most in between everything you do?
My fiction writing. I love creating new stories and new worlds. I've been working on a bunch of comedies lately, and just looking at Hollywood, there seems to be a weird little gap where not a lot of comedies have been coming out. So I'm hoping to change that this next few years ahead of us. Get back to some good old fashioned 80s or 90s styles comedy. They're just entertaining. There's not a really big message there. Just you can go and laugh your head off and forget about things for a little bit.
I know, we need that. All right. So one last question on business is, of course, we all know AI is now, technology is changing everything we do.
Yeah.
How is that impacting your world?
I love it. It's making things a lot easier in some respects. And I think a lot of it, I'm always curious about the people that kind of fear monger around this stuff, where they're like, oh my God, AI is going to replace everybody, and what are we going to do? And so I was a member of something called the Authors Guild here in the States, and I canceled my membership because their response to AI was they're just like filing lawsuits left and right. And it just reminds me what happened in the late 90s, early 2000s, when streaming started becoming a thing. And the music industry, instead of embracing that technology, they tried to sue everybody out of existence. And it was like a game of whack-a-mole. So in 1999, the music industry made $40 billion, I think is what it was. And they didn't embrace streaming, and they tried to fight it. And I think even as like just a couple of years ago, they were maybe back up to like $15 billion. So like they lost like 90% of their revenue because they wouldn't embrace the technology. They didn't really embrace it until Steve Jobs came along with the iPhone, and then they were like, well, now we can do it, right? So I feel like that's what's going on in AI. You should be embracing it. You should be learning how to use it. So a good example, I have a good friend of mine. He's a prolific fiction fantasy writer. And so when he builds out a series of books, 5 or 6 books, you have to do all the world building around that. And he'll sometimes create 800, 900,000 words of just the world building material, the backstories, the races, the religions, the topography, the cities, the cultures. None of that goes into the books, but that's what he needs to have the foundation to write those stories. Right. That usually takes him 8 or 9 months to build that foundation. With AI, he's able to do it in 2 days now.
So that's what I love about AI.
And again, none of that is going into the books, but it's giving him the foundation that he can go. And so it's the same, right? A lot of people, they won't ever get started on a book because they get hung up on they don't know what to write about, and they use that as an excuse not to get started. So just like in film, you've got 3 stages: pre-production, production, post-production, plan, produce, edit.
Right.
It's the same with the book. You got to plan. 95% of people skip the planning part. And what is the plan? The plan is the outline. So if you even can come up with a rough idea of like, here's 8 or 9 things I know I want to talk about, and you can use AI and go, here are 8 or 9 things I can talk about. How can I structure this in a cohesive, engaging book outline? And it'll help you rearrange that. And now suddenly you've got a clear roadmap. And so now you can then go take your experience and write around all those things that AI helped you discover. AI isn't, and maybe someday this will change. I honestly don't feel that it will, but AI just, you're saying, here's a story, and you give it a short prompt and a couple of things and expecting it to be able to write a full novel. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And there's a marketer that I follow. He's probably the number 2 or number 3 guy in the world with using AI in the writing space. And he said something on a live Ask Me Anything maybe 3 weeks ago. I thought it was really interesting because somebody said, okay, we're in this age of AI. How do I get an advantage in the age of AI? And his response was, the ultimate advantage in the age of AI is for you to become more human.
Oh, I love that.
And I was like, and it comes back to authenticity.
It does. Right? It does. Have a style, have your own voice. Yes, because the AI is not going to do that. You still have to have your own voice, and you still have space for creativity there.
Yeah, being authentic, and I think doing live videos, doing live streams, so that people then know you're actually not AI because it's live. Those are going to be the 2 things that are going to let you stand out if that's what you are wanting to do in your business.
And I can tell you that. I mean, this podcast, can I speak? I can't speak anymore. But this podcast that I started 3 months ago, it's been incredible. I didn't expect this, and people listen because yes, it's real. It's a video, it's a conversation, it's giving ideas, it's inspiring, and it works better than any marketing strategies I've launched in the past 2 years. I mean, it's unbelievable what it's doing. So there are different ways of doing marketing, and you have to be open to being yourself and not being afraid of looking at yourself in a video. That's okay. Right?
Oh, that's so hard.
It's so hard. All right, well, this is great. So one last thing I'm going to ask you, Travis, because I ask this to all my guests. Everybody's going through challenges in their lives. So maybe if you can find a couple, or maybe one example of a challenge that you had to overcome that really changed your perspective, that opened doors, and that could be inspirational and motivational to my audience. What would that be?
My wife has probably taught me the greatest business lesson, and it was her lesson wasn't in business; it was in personal life. But my wife, she used to be a fitness model. She's very beautiful, and when she was in LA, she would get headhunted by the millionaire matchmaker type of people, right? So she was getting set up on dates with just ridiculously wealthy people, and she found over time that most of them were not really good people. And so they had all this money and all this wealth, and then they thought that then I can buy what I want. I can buy the happiness that I want. But the reason they were single is because they weren't good people. And so over a series of time, she noticed that she had kept dating the same person kind of over and over and over and over, and kind of reached a low point where she's like, what is going on? And it was the realization of in all of these relationships, there's only one common denominator: me. And so she then was like, until I change myself, nothing's going to change in my life. And then she started working on herself. And then I showed up, and so it worked fantastically. But I realized that in a business sense, when it comes to challenges, when you hear a lot of people talk about, I feel stuck. I'm stuck in this thing. Or you hear people go why does that always happen to me? This one particular experience has happened to me 5 or 6 times in my life. Why is that? There's only one common denominator in that, and that's you. So the thing that has changed my life and my career the biggest was recognizing that there's things about myself that I can't see, that I am my own biggest saboteur. And so I need outside eyes to help me pinpoint what those things are so that I can address those and, replace bad beliefs or bad habits or bad rituals with more optimized ones that actually help me to go forward. And the interesting thing is when you do that, you'll actually find things becoming easier and easier and easier for you, because it's not about hustling longer, grinding longer, working harder hours, doing another course, it's about removing the chains that you're dragging around that's slowing you down. If you can just cut away the dead, emotional weight that you're trapped with, it makes moving forward much faster. That's probably
It's great advice. It is so true. Plus, that's the only thing you can really control is yourself. You cannot control others, and you track what you project. That too is important. So, and it's hard sometimes because you fall into the same habit of doing the same thing, and it is exactly the description of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. It does not work. So that's wonderful advice. So thank you for that.
There's a book called, I hope I get it right, I think the working title is The Courage to Be Disliked.
I love that.
And it's apparently it's based off of Japanese philosophy, but a lot of it is all about that, you know, the challenges in your life are your doing, and it's because you've made decisions about how to see the world that may, again, I use the word optimize, because there's nothing right or wrong, right? You're on your journey where you're supposed to be to learn the lessons that you need to be to become the person you can be. You know, so some people will choose to learn those lessons, and the ones that don't get to just keep repeating them over and over and over again until they do. But that book really kind of opens the door for you being able to start spotting, like, oh, maybe there's better ways that I can be showing up in the world to make this journey a little bit more fulfilling and joyful.
Yeah, that's so very true. So great advice. All right. So if someone wants to get hold of you, what's the best way to do this?
Well, LinkedIn, obviously. My website's traviscody.com, and I also have a website called go.bestsellerbydesign.com. That's my brand. We create bestsellers by design, and it's not luck. There's a process we follow. So if anybody's ever thought about writing and publishing a book, whether it's a memoir, a fiction book, or a business book, Bestseller by Design is the place that they'll want to go to.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on the show here,
Travis.
Thank
you, Catherine.
What an incredible experience. What an incredible background. And you're doing something very important for people. Give them a chance to put their story or write something and create a book, something that will be there when they leave forever, and that their family too can benefit from.
Well, I'll help them get their story, and then they can bring it to you to make it look good and presentable into the world.
That's right.
Be the 1-2 punch.
That's right. That sounds good. Well, thank you again so much. Thank you everyone for watching. Please share this video of my conversation with Travis on your network. I need your help to share as well. This way we can reach to a lot more people, and a lot more people can benefit from Travis's services and also write their books. Maybe, hey, you know someone who would want to do that. So make sure they know about this. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And we will see you next time.
Bye.